Ladies and gentlemen, this is my last panel, and we were introduced by the barcarolle from the Tales of Hoffman, and what that stands for is love. And each of the panelists has a love of their commodities or the clean energy transition, which is really the most important issue that we're facing today, is that how can we meet the Paris Accord conditions without the metals, and I think we can't. But it's not my job to tell you. Gerard is a world authority on the clean energy transition for 20 years now. And where are we now?
We're on a good path, a great path, really. So if you just look, say, for example, last year, you probably would have had across the world 500 gigawatts worth of renewables installed. That was up 100% in the year before. And if you look at this year, you probably get another, certainly solar will probably grow by another 50% this year, and wind will be up by 20%. Also, you're seeing quite a lot of development in the hydro space. We're getting the first pumped hydro plant built in Europe in 25 years right now. And you can go into the other technologies in and around it. Hydrogen is only at the beginning. It's also taking off. EV batteries, 40% increase in electric vehicles last year, probably another 40% this year. And you will just extrapolate that out till 2030, and you need massive amounts of minerals.
Yeah, but when you extrapolate it, you're also extrapolating the need for the metals to deliver it. So
absolutely.
The fundamental issue is, where are we going to get the metals from, and what are the key metals that are essential to delivering on the clean energy transition?
Well, listen, I give you from outside what I think. First and foremost, if I think of solar, a solar panel is the most important thing is silver, believe it or not, going forward. Silver and aluminium, they're the two things really in a solar panel. Wind turbine, lots and lots of metal, right? Huge amounts of copper, also increasing amounts of carbon fiber in them and steel. You go into lithium-ion batteries, well, lithium, right, for a start. And if you're going to join all these together, you need lots of copper or aluminium, right? And then you've got a whole pile of trace materials and rare earth metals, right? You think of it like you want to go and do a permanent magnet or something like that, or any form of motor. You need rare earth.
Didn't Elon Musk say he didn't need the rare earth minerals anymore?
Yeah, of course, he wants to get the price of the rare earth metals down, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Simple as that. He's playing his game, right? He uses social media better than we do. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. I think we better be serious for a moment. So we're going to have discussion throughout. But Alex Sukernik of Nova Royalty has only got exposure to copper and nickel without risk. He's the only investment in copper and nickel without the risk. Could you say a few words on where the hell is the copper and nickel going to come from?
It's a great question. If you look at how much copper we're going to need, Anglo American, when they built Quellaveco in Peru, they said they're going to need 60 Quellavecos by 2040. So that's 60 large copper mines. That's roughly 3 to 40 a year in this time frame. For an industry that builds less than one per year, and it's only getting harder. You need more capital. You need more operating expertise, permitting, social. So the demands on the miners are getting greater. The need for the material is greater than it's ever been. So it's a good question how the world is going to produce the necessary copper in order to achieve the energy transition. So clearly the price has to go up materially, but even with a higher price, there will need to be some breakthroughs in specific jurisdictions where it actually becomes viable to build multiple major mines, which is what you're going to need. Nickel, it's even more complicated because you have fewer viable projects altogether. The technical complexity is very high, and the world currently is very reliant on Indonesian nickel, which for the Western world is becoming more and more difficult given the geopolitical issues. So you have people trying to secure nickel in jurisdictions they understand, whether it's Canada, Australia, US, but you still have a dearth of critical projects. So I think in both cases, it's an open question how we're going to get the materials that we actually need in order to achieve all the goals.
I think nickel's more serious than the others, because the issue with me is that China basically has got its supply of nickel secure, It's got the Russian nickel, which the West has denied. It's got the Indonesian nickel. So really, it's absolutely up to the Americas to come up and develop several nickel mines, and they're there.
If you look at the policy of the United States, it's been essentially to outsource raw materials production to allies around the Americas. But it's not, while permitting inside the country has been very challenging. But you're coming to a point where you will not be able to just cavalierly outsource that, because you're going to need more and more metal. So I think overall, from a permitting and mining viability perspective, you're going to need pretty substantial changes if the Western world is going to meet its material needs, no question.
Fine. I think we'd better actually shift over. Christopher, what about lithium? Why hasn't lithium been mentioned yet?
He mentioned lithium-ion batteries. I mean, you don't get the lithium-ion batteries without the lithium. Very interesting couple of years we've had here. I mean, I would divide up the whole battery metal space into 3 phases. We had the boom of 2009, 2010, which was really sort of truncated by the appearance of rare earths, which took the wind out of the sails of lithium. Then we had a long period where the promises of the EV boom of 2009-10 were not really realized in a dramatic surge in EV sales. You had hybrids and things happening, but really the rubber started to hit the road in 2017, where we had lithium boom Mark II, or battery metal boom Mark II, which is when we actually had a liftoff in the whole of the battery metal complex. You know, prices of cobalt went up, the prices of lithium, graphite got a bit of attention again, but people started, saying what's going on here. Then you had a Wall Street firm came out and said that by 2025 there'd be too much lithium, and so the prices would crash. There'd be too much production, and that was a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, reverse self-fulfilling prophecy, because it in fact crashed the whole of the lithium space. There was hardly any investment for a couple of years, except from some diehards who were largely hangovers from the first lithium boom. And then that led to the situation where the market was ripe by 2020 for lithium boom Mark III, or battery metal boom Mark III, which we're still in, which is where suddenly the truncation of potential production that was caused by the 2017 scaremongering actually meant that there'd hardly been any investment by a whole generation of new lithium companies that were rather sort of beggared by the experience. And finally, some money started to flow into the sector, and we started to get deals. And the deals have been getting progressively bigger and bigger. And we saw just last night in Australia, the Liontown bid, which I think is actually being rebuffed by the management. And it's a sign of the times that the management's cheeky enough to say we can get better. But we've seen some really ritzy valuations, if not crazy, out there, with Lake Resources, an Australian listed stock, getting up to earlier last year, 3.5 billion Australian dollar market cap, which was a vast multiple of any of the prices that had actually been paid for either producing or near producing assets. And it was a market, gave it a market cap that was bigger than many of the actual producers in the space. But that is the type of sort of frenzy that we've seen. But now this year, or really since November, we've had a pullback, because most of the lithium companies had warned, particularly the ones with with their head screwed on, that the soaring price in China last year, which was really quite crazy, would come down, and they were afraid that it would impact their stock prices. And we've seen that it has done so. The Chinese prices dropped by like a third. Many of the lithium stocks have dropped by half. And yet the irony is that all of the serious lithium players have been using a price in their models that is a mere fraction of even the beaten down Chinese price now. So it's been a scenario where this vortex of Chinese speculation has actually sucked down the lithium sector in a sort of a mass delusion that the Chinese price actually means anything for any of these wannabe developers, because most of them won't be in production for a couple of years, and everyone knew that the Chinese price was just really a phantom price that would come and go, and it's gone.
Christopher, that's enough. I mean, essentially, we are going to get our lithium. The lithium will be produced, but
Some will.
I want to pass it over.
Don't
to
take it for
Alison.
granted.
I want to pass it to Alison because she's got objectivity about her. And what is the problem? And the problem is the volatility of some of these metals, and the investment climate is not conducive right now.
I think it's pretty brutal actually for a lot of these exploration and junior mining companies trying to develop these projects, particularly in such an opaque market. It's very difficult to, as you say, look at pricing and know what's going to be. If you've got history and decades of data, as you might have in the copper and the nickel industry, lots of standards, it's easy. And it's, well, not easy, I can't say forecasting's not an easy subject, but particularly for, say, a graphite miner, a fluorspar miner, you're not seeing a lot of finance flowing into those kind of companies.
But surely the opportunities are there and the need is there. Where's the finance going to come from? I certainly think in the case of copper that what we're going to find is we're going to find a lot of money coming from the producers to buy assets that are in development and save themselves 15 years of waiting. And I think they'll pay up, and I think there'll be competition. So I see a boom. Gerard, am I overly optimistic?
No, there is a boom. And I think I was just thinking to myself that Volkswagen is putting 15 billion into a new factory. Well, what's the point in them doing that if they don't have their hands on cobalt, lithium, manganese, and so on? So at some point, these manufacturers will vertically integrate. I have no doubt about that. And
yeah, but it's for certain that this is going to happen with copper. That's an absolute certainty. With nickel, it's much more difficult in nickel, getting projects up and financed. There's not enough of them. But the Biden administration is surely going to change its policy on domestic sources of copper and nickel. It really has to, because of the geopolitical situation.
It's the exact same in Europe. We have an act going through the European Parliament now, exactly in and around this. There's no doubt about it. If you look today, if I go and buy a lithium-ion battery, or I want to go into lithium-ion production, I really can't do it in Europe because I cannot get my hands on any materials, because the Chinese have the whole value chain from processing down to raw material, right?
Well, it gets worse. I mean, let's not go into rare earth minerals, but let's look at cobalt. China seems to have got its hands on about 80% of the world's cobalt. And where's the cobalt going to come from, and how are we going to develop a cobalt project other than in the DRC?
It's tough. It's tough, and that's actually one of the biggest problems, that if you think in this energy transition, you're moving away from a dependency on, say, a Saudi Arabia or Russia in terms of your oil and gas, and now you're going to be dependent on the DRC, which is not easy for anybody to actually get their head around. People are looking for alternatives, but look, you guys are miners. I'm not. I'm a technology guy. Well, it's not easy to go and get the other.
You've certainly made the case for exploration for nickel and cobalt in Canada, which I think
anywhere and everywhere. I think in the West, if we be clear, we talked about at lunchtime, what we've done in the West is we don't want to do any mining in the Western world, so we've outsourced it to other countries. We're going to have to insource it again. There's no way around it. You can see this in the Nordics. They're now looking at, okay, what can we produce up there? You've seen this going to change in the US, Canada. We've no choice.
You brought something to the table in your earlier peroration. You mentioned silver. Nobody talks about silver as a battery metal. They talk about copper and nickel and lithium and cobalt. But silver is critical, is it not?
Of course, all the electrodes on a solar panel are silver, right?
Right. And so where does the silver come from?
Well, I hope from guys like him.
Hopefully. No, it comes from places like Mexico or Argentina. And it's time that there was a silver project in Europe, one or two. I mean, Europe is actually lagging behind in the mining sector, because Europe at the moment, the way it looks, is Europe will be stuck between the East, which is controlled by China, and the West, which is controlled by America. And really, Europe is in a difficult position for supplying these metals.
Not just those metals.
And I do not understand why there's not more pro-mining lobbying in Europe, and I think we should actually begin to talk about it. But Alex, I mean, time to contribute. What do you think are the key issues that we're looking at? And do you think that we are going to be getting the metal? Do you think we can deliver the clean energy transition through metals?
Well, we're definitely going to deliver a part of it. And I think what will happen is, in an environment which is very difficult, the winners will be actually not that many people. It'll be the big companies. And kind of, if you look at the metal camps of the future, it's going to be multiple majors in one camp that's probably bigger than any of the camps that preceded it. Because it's not easy to find a place where they will let you build something large, where you'll have all the support from the government to the business community to the social. You'll want to have a good location. When you find that and you find the metal endowment, you're going to probably crowd multiple majors into that camp, and it's going to be bigger than anything we've ever seen. And I think it's going to be those sort of consortium type deals in selected locations that will probably drive the energy transition. I mean, from what I see today, I don't think you'll see the social tide change to the point where they're going to embrace mining. I mean, you have generations of people that have grown up hostile to mining, fundamentally hostile to mining. That's probably not going to change. But I do think as part of sort of realization that something needs to get done, you're going to have extraction zones, which I think will be permitted. And that's how you'll deliver the metal. It's probably going to result in pretty high inflation in terms of cost of production. The prices will have to go up. And I think it'll be more challenging for the smaller producers necessarily to operate, because the demands will still be very high. But the large companies, those with the best projects, they will be the absolute biggest winners of this entire movement, no question.
Yeah, what I think is going to happen is, we had it in the 80s before the rest of us were up there on a panel. And in the 80s, it was the oil sector. The oil industry was making very big profit margins, and it went into the mining sector and took over a number of the big mining companies. So what's going to happen this time, and Alison had better come in and correct me, is that rising prices for the metals are going to increase the profits made by the producers of those metals. They are depleting their resources of the metal. They need the metal over the next 5 years to meet the commitments they've got. You can't deal with the ThyssenKrupp unless you can offer them continuity of supply. They are going to take over development projects. It is inevitable. So investors who are stuck in development projects losing their shirt are going to get a technicolored dream coat, don't you think?
I think the future is definitely with the end users stepping up to enable development of projects, because you don't have the depth of the institutional market right now to support that in a real way. So really the people who need the material the most, which is the people who use it, will need to step up. And you're beginning to see that. GM invested into Lithium Americas. Stellantis just invested in a copper project in Argentina called Los Azules. So you're seeing the end users begin to step up and really begin to finance the sector. And it's still very early days. I think you could be looking at a situation where essentially mines are almost taken private, where they become captive to an off-taker or a number of off-takers who then essentially are responsible for them, and that's how they get into production. I mean, the industry, but I think, whereas if you go back to the previous cycles of mining, and I think the institutional markets and the overall capital markets were deep enough and excited enough about the sector to finance them well enough where, the miner really controlled the supply chain, and could sell through various brokers and traders. Now you're going to a different place where the end user controls the supply chain much more, and they drive the development of projects.
Now, Alison, do you think we have a right to be optimistic, or should we be sitting there sulking and licking our wounds over the underperformance of the share portfolio?
No, I think actually, I think optimism is the order of the day. I mean, there's actually a bit of a structural change going on in some of the industries. I mean, if you take graphite, this year you're going to see more of the natural flake graphite going into batteries than you do in refractories. Now, that is a huge shift of what essentially has been an industrial mineral
That's
going forward.
substitution.
And that's the thing about graphite. At the moment, it's used in the anode of the batteries. There isn't anything that's going to substitute it in the next 10 years. They're going to increase the amount of silicon. They might move to different sorts of anodes, but at the moment, you need that graphite. And at the supply chain is at the moment, it's quite a few projects. There's projects in the US to produce what they call spherical graphite, which is what actually goes into the batteries. At the moment, that's all produced in China. So we're right at the beginning of that curve. It's opportunity time. It really is. If you can look and produce move towards zero carbon using alternative energy sources and things like this, it'll really make a difference. And that is an opportunity in my book. That's the way you must look at it, not a sort of challenge that we can't overcome.
I think we should be positive, but Gerard, don't you think that batteries are a very key part of our future?
Of course, you can't electrify.
They're central.
You can't electrify the automobile without a battery. And if you take the full system, you cannot electrify the full system without some form of storage. And at present, batteries is, I would say, it's the easiest way to do it. And the reason I say it's the easiest is because a battery can be big or small. If we decide to put a pumped hydro station in, it'll take 10 years, right? That's what I mean, right? I counted recently in my home, just out of fun with my daughter, how many lithium-ion batteries I had, and we had 350 lithium-ion batteries, right? They're everywhere. So you can't get away without storage, right? Simple as that.
I think we had a really good point made earlier about technology and technology changes, and there will be technology changes. I think in the battery space, you might see sodium-ion batteries coming through. You might even see fluorine-ion batteries going through. But the amount of change that is going on in that area is just incredible. We've learnt this morning, it's a sea change. And I think that's almost where we've got to get to with our thinking in terms of what's going to be needed going forward.
Alison, you're a breath of fresh air. Christopher, what would you like to add to this discussion?
No, it's there's a lot of wishful thinking about the potential for the supplies to get here, as one of the other speakers pointed out. The price is going to be inflation. Prices have to go up because there's going to be a shortage in the short term of it's going to be a lumpy situation where you're going to have not enough lithium, then you'll briefly have a wave of maybe projects that are coming along now will suddenly come in 3 years from now. So there'll be a shortage until then, and then there'll be an excess period, and then the prices will go down, and then development will stop again. As we've seen in so many metals, way beyond just the battery metal space, you end up with this lumpy situation where you get spikes and dumps because you've got either too much production, not enough production, and there's no reason that the battery metal space, without some sort of command economy, is actually going to be delivering the product. So Washington may have fallen in love with the concept of the battery metals and be prepared to back the construction of gigafactories in the US, but it's not making any reach beyond that to making sure that that there are the lithium, the cobalt, the graphite, and the fluorspar mines, because fluorspar is drastically critical for the electrolyte in the batteries. Without, you can have your electrode and anode, no electrolyte, no battery. And hexafluorophosphate is the crucial element there that's hardly ever mentioned in the battery space. But so we've got shortages, or enormous shortages, in these metals, and they're not necessarily all going to be provided at the same time. The cobalt space has only one real company outside of the DRC that's evolving at the moment, which is Gerard Global, an Australian company that's opening a mine in Idaho. But all these various cobalt booms that we've had since the really big one of 2006 have not actually produced any new production of cobalt outside of the DRC, where really it's just a hostage of Chinese and Glencore interests, and Chinese and Glencore interests could be with a oblique line between them. You know, that's the situation. And fluorspar, no one's doing anything.
Yeah, actually, sorry, I was going to say the IRA, they've just invested 100 million in a lithium, whatever it is. You can't get
A gigafactory.
the hexaphosphate.
Hexafluorophosphate.
Orbia are going to put a plant in with using South Korean technology.
And where are they getting the fluorspar from?
From Mexico.
From Mexico?
Across that, they're the biggest.
Mine. Yeah, but they're only 15% of the global supply.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's because it's not only the sort of electrolyte, it's in the separator that you use fluoropolymers, fluoroelastomers in all these wirings that are going into the electric cars.
And tin to coat the electrodes to stop them overheating.
Let's get back to the main subject. I mean,
that was the main subject.
Essentially, the answer is rising prices. Demand is there, prices must rise because the supply isn't there. As the prices rise, the margins get better for the majors.
Or electric vehicles are priced out.
Oh, no, don't start.
Already the average price of a car in the UK is £39,000. It's gone up like £10,000 in the last few years.
Look, the subject is battery metal.
Yeah, but if you can't, if you're not getting the sales of the EVs, you're not going to be selling the batteries either.
Gerard,
they're unaffordable.
Gerard, can you arbitrate on this?
Well, listen, the facts speak for themselves, right? Last year, as I said to you, you had electric vehicle sales across the world up, well over 50%. You had the two, if you like to say, in the home of the automobile, Germany, 20% of cars were electric. China, the exact same. You can't stop the revolution, right? And there's no doubt, listen, you think of it, you think of how high the lithium price was last year.
Yeah.
You still had that growth in sales going forward. And if I look,
the tin price has gone up. The silver price has not yet gone up.
No, but what
copper and nickel.
Well, I have to realize also what's going on in the car, right? So it's not just about you're thinking of from a mineral perspective. If I take the Tesla Model S, the reason the range of the cars got better is nothing to do with the fact that they're putting more battery in it or more lithium. It's because of the power electronics, right? You've got innovations taking place all around that whole car that actually lower the cost of it going forward.
Yeah, that's being driven in China more than in Europe or America.
It is, absolutely. Of course, the Chinese are, without a doubt, Tesla, let's be clear, Tesla's leading globally. And then you've got, I would say BYD, the Chinese player, probably number two. And then you've got some of the Europeans trying to play catch up.
When you buy an electric BMW, lift up the bonnet and find it's been made in China.
Yeah, that's the way it is.
But, I mean, the world is changing and we need to have these metals. And I'm pleased with Alison's optimism and Christopher's controversial comments.
No, but Christopher's right. If the price of these minerals goes too high, you will not be able to bring electric cars to the masses, right? He's right.
But if you bring enough supply into the market, the price will come down.
No, but but again, we're back to the point is you need to have a signal so that the investment takes place. And the problem is you're going to try and let's assume you're going to build lithium mines, and you're not really sure what the demand for that product is going to be in 5 years' time. I mean, that's pretty a scary investment. So you really have to understand what's going on in the automobile and the industry, or in the case of silver, understand what's going on in the soul, and begin to look at off-take arrangements with them, et cetera, et cetera. And also, by the way, we did talk about that the speed of technology change is enormous, right?
Well, government
so it's tough.
Support. The government should.
But what if they make the wrong bet?
Well, I mean, the government should be providing subsidies on a perpetual basis to assist.
So they make the wrong bet and cost us all taxpayer a huge amount of money.
You got government subsidies, you got tax breaks, you got the situation answered, haven't you?
I actually think what you need to do is have a joint up strategy, which is what the Chinese do. The Chinese 10 years ago realized, they said, two technologies we have to dominate going forward, lithium ion and solar, and they do. But they made a strategic decision and said, okay, we're going to do this. And they basically created the market, created the product, and off they went. But it's not subsidies. It was really very clear long-term strategy. Yeah. And that's probably what we don't have in the industry because, again, if I was a miner today or an investor, I go, exactly what Christopher says. I don't know what that market's going to be in 2030, because if the price go up too high, and I did a lot of work in the vanadium space, right? People have been talking about vanadium flow batteries for years. Let me tell you why they haven't gone to market. Because of the vanadium price volatility. And because of the fact that, and I looked at one business where 95% of the cost of goods sold for that battery was vanadium. So guess what? It's all about vanadium pricing, and trying to get a long-term agreement for 10 years in and around vanadium at the right price. Good luck to you. Guess what? Vanadium hasn't come on the market, even though it's a very good technology, but basically niche market will always stay there because of this. Lithium is easier because there's much more sources for lithium, and there's a general view there's enough of it out there, right?
And cobalt's difficult. I think we've run
But
out.
there are alternatives to cobalt, right?
I know.
Alternatives.
Well, we're about run out of time, so I'd just like to ask each of the panelists in turn. Alex, should we be positive or negative?
Oh, I think if you're anywhere near the production of critical minerals and you have projects that are viable, legitimately viable, meaning you have the right location, strong technical resource, and an operator, they can take it into production. I don't think there's ever been a better time. So I think from that perspective, definitely positive. That said, the risks are rising, so I think the number of those people are probably going to be less than what you'd like. But absolutely, I think the opportunities for those who have really done their homework are phenomenal.
So, Gerard, on balance,
Oh, I'm incredibly positive, Rob.
Yeah,
it's a chance of our lifetime, and it's all about resources. And it's not just, if you just look at the amount of money that people are making in the resources space, right? I don't care if you're a lithium-ion manufacturer or Saudi Aramco, world record profits in the resources area, and then we're sitting here moaning about the fact that we can't raise money. I'm sort of going, well, then we're doing something wrong in terms of how we're communicating with these guys, because
Gerard,
there's cash everywhere to go into resources.
That is absolutely, you nailed something that should have been discussed before. If Saudi Aramco has got 160 billion to spare, and they're talking about Vision 2030, where they are progressing towards what you have been standing for 10 to 20 years, could Saudi Arabia become the new Norway?
Of course.
Well, I mean, that makes sense, and that's another large source of capital for copper and nickel projects. Alison, can you, on balance, positive or negative?
On balance, I'm positive, because taking a step back, this is all being regulation driven. This is government policy to put, no new ICEs after 2030. That's where it's all being driven from. So I am positive. It's going to get carried through. They might delay it a little bit, but that's the direction of travel. So there's definitely opportunities.
Well-meaning bureaucrats with the wrong assumptions. Yeah. Christopher, do you want to be different?
Yeah, it's all about production. I mean, all you need to do is look at Albemarle and how much money Albemarle is making at the moment.
Yeah.
It's minting money because it's in production. Everything else is on a scale from 1 to 100 of where they are to production. But the companies that are making the lithium at the moment are minting it. And that's why it was Albemarle that made the bid for Liontown yesterday. Interested, they're not waiting around for a car manufacturer to come and buy Liontown. They're doing it themselves, because ultimately the car manufacturers are very wary. The car manufacturers haven't made their own tires for 100 years. They haven't made their own batteries for 100 years. They've always relied upon somebody else to make them for them. They just made the key thing and the motor that went in it. People seeing the OEMs as being the salvation, probably not. The government's definitely not the salvation of anything. The government, the whole IRA thing in the US is half cooked. It's like the end part of it, it's the downstream. The upstream is just sort of being left to fate. And if the Chinese have anything to do with it, they'll make sure that that fate is not in US favor.
Yeah, okay, but car manufacturers outside China are working on old business models, and they're not going to be able to deliver. We could talk all night, but what I suggest is the panelists have all made their points. So I think we should revisit this 1 year's time and see who was right and who was wrong.
How do you think the battery space can go into aviation?
Well, it goes out. It's already there. So if you're talking about drones, they're all battery powered, right? So you're
More-
there already. And if you're looking, we're going to longer distance, short distance flights, as in 150, 200 kilograms, they'll go fully electric. Also small helicopters. The larger planes, no, absolutely not. No, I don't believe, and I don't believe this is going to happen. I think you're going to do this with, if you want to decarbonize them, you're going to decarbonize them really with biofuels and, at some point e-fuels going forward. But again, we might be shocked. There might be, new technologies that come our way, right? You might have.
Could vanadium
What?
batteries go into planes?
Yeah, they could, yeah. Yeah, they're very expensive at present, but there's no doubt. Listen, let's be really clear. The American military have incredible batteries that they use in drones that have ranges that are pretty unbelievable. But the batteries you just can't pay for them, right? But they can pay for them for military, right? So, and you just mentioned one of the possibilities.
Yeah. But Gerard, the difference is we're talking about it, you're doing it.
I know, I just finance the technology companies. That's what I do. That's all.
Yeah. But the changes in Germany over the last 20 years are just absolutely spectacular. And we're going to see these changes in other European countries. And I think we should be optimistic, but I also think we should be reviewed in 1 year's time just to see who was right and who was wrong.